As a big fan of Warhammer and also video games, Warhammer 40k Darktide was easily at the top of my hype list because unfortunately, although there is a huge quantity of Warhammer games set in the 40k universe, not very many of them are what you would call high quality. There hasn't been a really great 40k game ever since 2011 with the launch of Space Marine. So needless to say, I was very hyped to see that Darktide would be a return to that universe, and even more hyped to see that it was being developed by Fat Shark, who made Vermintide 2. Unfortunately, if you've been in the gaming loop, then you would know that Darktide officially launched on November 30th, 2022 to an extremely underwhelming reception. I personally lost all interest after playing the beta because it just seemed really unbalanced, guns felt weird to fire, and the performance was poor to say the least. So needless to say, I didn't end up purchasing the game until the most recent update, patch 13, launched on October 3rd, 2023, and not only am I really happy that I decided to finally play it, but I'm even more glad that I decided to hold off until this point. First up, I've got to give Fat Shark massive props on the graphics and environmental design because this is an extremely stunning game from both a thematical and technical standpoint. They perfectly capture the grim dark atmosphere of 40k to create the hideously beautiful, bleak, and worn down Hive City Tertium. The lighting alone is perfected down to every corner of every single map, and it creates an atmosphere that not only inspires fear but also a sense of wonder. It's honestly one of the most beautiful games I've ever played in my entire life, and sometimes I really can't help but just stop and stare to admire the handcrafted environments. But you're not here for graphics, right? Because who really gives a shit about graphics if the game isn't fun to play? Luckily for you, the game plays just as great as it looks. If you're familiar with Vermintide 2, it's the same melee combat you know and love so well, with the addition of guns. If you're not familiar with Vermintide 2, however, well, then allow me to explain. First, I'll start with range combat because honestly, there isn't very much to say about it. Guns feel extremely responsive with realistic and simultaneously manageable recoil, and they're also reasonably powerful. They're overall a great addition to the game that allows for more freedom in how you play. You can either go in guns blazing and waste all your ammo on a big horde, or strategically decide when and where to pull out your gun, perhaps choosing to save your ammo for elites or maybe bosses. Not to mention, the sound design for all of these weapons is just incredible. As for the melee combat, this is where the game really begins to shine at its absolute brightest. I would love to make an analogy for the melee combat in this game, but it's actually so unique and so perfect that no other game even comes close enough to compare it, besides Vermintide 2, but that should be pretty freaking obvious. To start with, this game has an incredible gore system. There's a shit ton of dismemberment paired with an absolute blood explosion anytime you butcher an enemy. If I had to compare it to anything, I would say that this is pretty much how it feels to chew 5 gum. You can dodge, block, and shove hordes of enemies as you absolutely brutalize them, wave after wave. For the most part, it is just melee spam, but it makes for some really amazing encounters when you come across a melee-focused enemy, and you have to actually maneuver around them and time your attacks and blocks perfectly to kill them rather than just wildly swinging. While there are a lot of different weapons, there's admittedly not very much variety with how they actually function, and unfortunately you're locked to class-specific weapons, which makes sense from a lore and realism perspective, but not much from a fun perspective. However, I will say that with the exception of the Ogryn, a lot of weapons are compatible across all the classes. For example, the Veteran, Zealot, and Psyker can all use auto guns, whereas only the Veteran and Zealot can use bolt guns, only Psykers can use force staves, and only Ogryns can use heavy stubbers. Also, all of these weapons have the ability to be upgraded using materials and currency gained from playing the game. Overall, the combat is easily the best part of this game. I mean, it is a horde shooter, after all. Every gun feels great to use with its own strengths and weaknesses, and melee feels just as satisfying in Hour 1 as it does in Hour 10. It's extremely well balanced, and I've never encountered an enemy that didn't feel like it couldn't be killed with a little bit of skill. If nothing else appeals to you about this game, I think combat alone is enough of a reason to at least give it a try. There's a really great enemy variety ranging from Tox Flamers and Demon Hosts to generic zombies, and strutting through hordes of heretics for Daddy Emperor always gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart. A little minute ago, I mentioned classes. To reiterate once more, you get the Veteran, Psyker, Ogryn, and Zealot, and they all have a niche to fill. Veteran has a focus on ballistic range gameplay and comes with combat shovels and plasma guns as their unique weapons. Zealot focuses on melee damage and gets access to two-handed chainswords and flamers. Psykers serve as a melee and ranged hybrid magic class using force staves and power swords. And finally, Ogryns act as a tank class with special access to slab shields and grenadier gauntlets. I want to clarify that you're by no means locked into that one specific build, rather it just kinda acts as a base to build off of. As a matter of fact, each class has 3 different skill trees you can go down. Also, this game of course has a leveling system referred to as trust levels. The max level is 30 and the rewards are pretty cut and dry, to be honest. As you level up, you gain skill points and get access to new weapons. Not much else to say about it. Now with the core gameplay loop out of the way, I want to discuss some minor nitpicks I have with the game that have hampered my enjoyment slightly, but so far aren't enough to make me quit the game. First up is the lack of solo play with bots, and look, I don't hate playing with randoms by any means. Okay, I play a lot of MMOs and survival games, so it's not like interacting with people is my kryptonite, but this game relies so heavily on cooperative play that it becomes really easy to get trolled. Luckily, I haven't ran into any malicious actors yet, but I did have one game where my teammates just would not enter the elevator. In case you're unfamiliar with how the game works, there's a lot of objectives that require all 4 squad members to be present, and elevators are one of them. If even just one single player isn't in the elevator, then you can't progress the mission. And that's just one example. There's a few other mechanics that require full cooperation. Sometimes I wish I could just simply hop into a quick match with a few bots and not have to worry about trolls or griefers. Aside from that, my other minor complaint is loading times. I'm running this game on a Samsung 970 EVO SSD and it can be really unpredictable. Sometimes I'll load in a couple seconds and other times I've sat there for a handful of minutes. I'm not sure what the cause of this is, but it's really annoying regardless. Other than that, I've been having an amazing time with this game and I'm really glad that I finally decided to give it a chance. It's a great horde shooter and it's exactly what I've always wanted from a Warhammer game set in the 40k universe. I honestly wouldn't pick it up for retail price, but for $30 or less, I think it's an absolute steal. It's definitely the type of game I can see myself coming back to pretty regularly every couple of months. It's got the best combat I've ever experienced in any horde shooter, and there's a pretty good amount of content to grind for. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.